Howdy there, this is MJ. I am continuing my series of revisiting The Mandalorian. This time I'm going to be talking about Mandalorian Chapter 2, which is called The Child. So I really liked this episode. I laughed a lot. I think I laughed a lot at the antics with the Jawas. I think one of the things I liked most about the episode, though, was that there was good humor based in the characters and based in them doing things that I believe that they would do, mostly the Mando. But also, I don't know, it was an interesting blend of action and adventure that we got to see. Basically, it's interesting. The Mando is stuck on this planet, whatever it's called, and he can't get off of it quite yet because his ship gets ransacked by these Jawas, and then he basically goes on this quest to get his ship back in order. And in order to do that, we have the Ugnaught help him out. And just like the Ugnaught kind of taught him something about taming I want to say Dewback, I know it's not Dewback, taming the Blurg in the previous episode, he kind of has to teach him something here again about, I don't know, about trade, about how he can, what does he teach him? How he can fit in with the Jawas? I'm not sure. It's interesting because Quill, I'm going to use his name because I know it already. Quill is he's like a semi-mentor. He says, he has a funny line where Mando's like, hey, I'm surprised you wait for me after he comes back from killing the Mudhorn and getting the egg. And Quill says, I'm surprised you took so long. And again, he knows the reputation of the Mandalorians and he's kind of hyping them up a little bit. Or he's not hyping them up, but he regards them well. And I find that to be pretty interesting. I'm not exactly sure why. It might be because, I have this reputation of knowing what the Mandalorians are capable of, like Boba Fett, and, seeing Jango Fett, of course, he was super awesome. He took on Obi-Wan, right? And attacked the clones. But, I don't know, I guess it's just interesting how Quill has the same vision of the Mandalorians and what they're like and what they're capable of that I have from being a Star Wars fan, because he's heard of these things that they're able to do. And, I don't know, I find that interesting. But that's not really the main point I want to bring up. There's a couple things I really liked in this episode. I liked how much Mando struggled. And I also liked, I don't know, it all felt very special. I ended up titling, kind of appending an extra title to my review from the last episode that it was like a day in the life of the Mando. And I was thinking, well, maybe, each episode, because I've seen the series already once and I'm just going through it again, so we meet the Mando in this episode. It's called The Mandalorian. Chapter 2 is called The Child. So, are we going to get to know about a bunch about the child? And technically we do. We get a big revelation of him being, force sensitive or whatever, and that he likes big, weird desert frogs. And I'm not sure what else was revealed about him, and I think that was a wrong-headed notion that I had. I guess maybe, I don't know, as I was watching, I was thinking that it's all very mythic. It's being presented in a very mythic way. Things are called by simple names. The Mando calls I can't remember what it's called now. He calls the crawling fortress because that's what it is. It's a fortress that crawls. He calls, he doesn't have a name for the child, so he calls it the child. The creature he fights, I don't remember if he calls it a Mudhorn in this episode or if it's in the next episode or later or what. But, that's the name of the creature. And, the Jawas are after the egg. And, you don't get to know Quill's name. He's just an Ugnaught, and I know that. So, he's an Ugnaught. And if I didn't know he was an Ugnaught, I'd probably call him, the mechanic or the rancher or something like that. Because he's, that's what he is. And it's almost it's really interesting to me the way that things are presented so singularly in the series. It's it's almost like it's a blank slate. It's a very lived-in universe, and we can tell that. And there are cultures that are represented, but there's no exposition, really. There's no explanation of what they are. They're just kind of presented to you. And one of the ways I don't remember if I mentioned this in my last review, but there was an interesting shot that was repeated where Mando was sitting in the cockpit of the Razor Crest, and then you see him and he's in his regular armor, and then he gets his pauldron because the Beskar, and then they show him again, and you see it all shiny and chromy, and it's like sticking out, and you notice it differently. Now, in this, after the Jawas strip his ship, you get to see him check one engine, he looks over at it, and he checks the other engine, he looks over at it. And then, later on in that episode, towards the end, it's repeated. Quill's in the cockpit with him after they've repaired it. And he checks the engine. He turns his head to look at it, the same one. And then in sequence, then he checks the next one, like he had before. This time it's different. Quill is with him. The engines are working. He's not alone. It's almost like there's a very interesting way that the shots are done. There's a rhyming and a repetition to it, a poetry, if you will, that like makes it more impactful. And it's interesting that the way things are being presented, it's a very show don't tell kind of series and show so far, and I really like that, and I'm really enthralled with what a good job they're doing of conveying the story without spelling everything out for you. It's really pretty awesome. Speaking of it being a very show don't tell type of show and not expositing to the audience, I like that because it puts a lot of trust in the audience to determine what the story actually is about and what is going on. And one of the things I found most interesting is that I thought in watching it this time that Mando isn't really a hero. He goes after this Mudhorn, he kills it with the help of the child, and he kills it, and he takes the egg to the Jawas, and they just cut it open and start. It looks very wasteful the way that they're eating it, but that's all. They chop it open, they start eating it with their hands, and it creates this big mess. And it's almost like it was all for nothing. It was almost like the quest didn't matter, but it did. Like, he needed to accomplish the task in order to get his ship back up and running, in order to turn in the child, or really ultimately through the narrative, or from a meta-narrative perspective, to get him back to where he has to make a choice as to what he's going to do with the child. At the end of episode 1, he had to make a choice of whether or not he was going to kill the child. He shot IG-11 instead. Here he kills a bunch of these Jawas, he fights against them, and then he ultimately kills this creature so that he can get his ship back, for his own autonomy, but also so he can take it, it being the child, I guess, to Grief Karga to sell it, I guess, or whatever the Moff is, or not Moff, whatever the Imperial dude is. He's going to be faced with this choice in the next episode, and it's just interesting how it's almost like it's a sidetrack and it's a side quest, so to speak, that gets him to go through these experiences, and we get to see the reveal of the child's Force abilities. And it's just interesting because it's kind of like it's mechanistic, and it has a function, a very practical function, but also beyond that, the way it was shown, the way it was executed, it doesn't feel like just a cheap thing that's meant to show you a cool action scene or whatever. It feels like it has a purpose. And one of the cool things that it shows or reveals is the child's ability. But also, I noticed a couple things when the Mando is going into the cave. The cave has this very dark look. It's almost like an eye. It feels, I think I had mentioned that something about this felt spiritual. That's what felt spiritual. He had to enter into this place of darkness, and he goes in there, and then this Mudhorn comes out and attacks him. If he's going after the egg and whatnot, and he's ready to die. He checks all his weaponry before he goes, and he goes in. He fails. His armor on the front is ripped open, and there's sparks flying and stuff, and he's at the edge of death. And it's funny because the suit acting tells you what's happening. He pulls out his knife, and he kind of resigns himself to dying with honor as he switches on the vibroblade. And that really says a lot about the culture. And I brought up that earlier, but I didn't really have a concrete example. There's a concrete example right there for you. And there's another iteration of show don't tell. None of this is said, and maybe some of it's baggage from me being a longtime Star Wars enthusiast, knowing about Mandalorians and their culture of honor and things like that, but I don't really know that much about them. There's not that much official stuff, and I didn't read like the Karen Travers novels or read through a lot of the EU stuff with them. I guess it's just been more recent, maybe the stuff from Rebels. I don't know, but regardless, I have an understanding of the Mandalorian's culture of honor. And I guess also this is my second time watching the series, so I know he mentioned some honor stuff later. But I don't know, it was just interesting how he was resigned to die. He'd entered this place of darkness. He's attacked by this creature that he cannot handle. He is resigned to die, and his life is saved by the child. And I almost feel like descending into that cave, going on this useless side quest, it's almost putting him in a position where he has an opportunity to change and grow and transform, and maybe he's kind of been born again, or like become a new person in going through this experience. And it's just kind of interesting how the seed's being planted there, because while having watched the series, I know he does change, so that's pretty interesting. That's pretty much all I have to say. Go ahead and check out mjmunoz.com for all my stuff. You can look up mjmunoz.com/FO to follow along with all of the fully operational episodes where I'm talking about Star Wars and a bunch of different Star Wars topics, including this entire series of catching up with Mandalorian Season 1 as I'm preparing myself for Mandalorian Season 2. That's pretty much all I have to say. mjmunoz.com has all sorts of stuff. There's podcast tabs, so you can, or podcast menus, so you can check out all the other stuff I do in podcast form. And I also have writing stuff there, as well as some artwork that I've done with different character designs. Some of them chrome wearing dudes in armor, who you might appreciate for having maybe a passing, glancing, somewhat very tangential similarity to the Mandalorian himself. So that's all I have to say, and until next time, take care.